Hey guys, it's Jess. What's going on today? I decided that I was going to do something a little different today. I wanted to focus on something I've got passion in, so we're going to go with some math and science, and it's going to be a blast. If you don't normally listen to the kind of stuff that I talk about, listen to this one. I think it's going to blow your mind. Um, but this time I'm going to be focusing on a specific number, which is 14 quadrillion. Why 14 quadrillion? Because a game came out recently called No Man's Sky that tells us that we get to explore the universe, that we can explore 14 quadrillion planets. And people are a little not so happy because they got the game and they go around to these planets and they discover these planets and they go, this planet looks a lot like the planet I was just at. And then this planet looks a lot like those planets. And why are they all so similar? You said there was going to be 14 quadrillion different possibilities. Well, I wanted to break that down a little bit and talk about 14 quadrillion because how big really is 14 quadrillion? Sure, it seems massive, right? It's a ridiculously huge number, and it is. And if I had 14 quadrillion dollars, I'd be very very pleased. But I wanted to talk about how it's not really quite as big as we think, at least in this context. So I'm going to be doing that today with a deck of playing cards. Now, this is an ordinary deck of bicycle playing cards. They have a special back because I collect playing cards. But this is just a normal old deck of 52 playing cards. I took the jokers out. It's just 52 playing cards. This is what I'm going to use as a representation to explain just how, well, small 14 quadrillion is. So, first of all, let me explain how No Man's Sky does what it does, because that's going to help make more sense out of this whole situation as to when I start breaking it down with cards. So, what No Man's Sky does is it uses what is known as procedural generation. Procedural generation is essentially that you have an algorithm that you can punch some information into and it'll spit out some other information. In this case, you start with a set of letters or numbers or something, randomized maybe, put into the algorithm, and it generates these planets. So if you don't really understand what an algorithm is, think of it as like a basic algebra problem of 5x minus 3 equals blank. And then they tell you x equals 2. You take the 2, you put it where the x is, and now you have 5 times 2 is 10, minus 3 equals 7. Bam. Perfect. Very simple. That's how an algorithm works, only on like a bigger scale. It's more data that you're putting in and more things being generated. So what they do is you have a seed. That seed, very much like planting a seed gets you a tree or something to that effect, planting a seed here gets you a planet. And that's how it works. And that seed is just a random generation or a random jumbling of letters and numbers or whatever they decided to use, just like X or 2. In my example, same thing here, only it could just be like a mishmash of stuff like GH57, QF6349, SFQG, etc. It could just be a random jumbling of numbers and letters. So when it comes to what they say of there's going to be 14 quadrillion different planets, is that really a lot? I mean, it sounds like a ridiculously huge amount. And they say, technically, if you did the math, it would take the population of the people playing the game 600 and whatever amount of years or something to possibly explore every planet if everybody's playing for that long. So, yeah, it's a huge amount. Except when it comes to trying to figure out why the planets are so similar, it's really not. So, let's start with this deck of playing cards. It's this deck of 52 playing cards. If I were to shuffle this deck, I mean, they're in a very random order, right? If I were to shuffle this deck, which I've been doing for a while now, and I'm shuffling it right now. It's really irrelevant because it doesn't matter whether you see this or not. It's a thought experiment. But so I've shuffled this deck of cards, and now this deck of cards is in a specific order from top to bottom. The cards are in a, whatever order they're in. So you can see, okay, they're in a random order. Now, if I were to shuffle these cards, shuffle, shuffling right now. If I shuffle these cards and I spread them out for you, they look like any other deck of cards, right? That's been mixed together. It's just a deck of cards. But if instead I said, okay, yes, there's all these other cards, but if you just take these first couple, remember the first couple cards, okay? Remember those first couple cards. Then I give it a quick shuffle, and I mix them up really good, or in this case, really poorly, because I'm not going to sit here and shuffle for a couple minutes. And then I say, okay, now does this deck look different? You remember the first couple cards, right? So if you've remembered the first couple cards, you know that they're different now. So in that sense, you see the differences. But all this other stuff, you don't even know if it's different or not. You have no idea because you can't remember that much information. So in terms of these planets, it's kind of the same thing. Like a couple major changes are made, like the first couple cards in this sequence that I told you to pay attention to. In this case, maybe the color of the planet, or the type of terrain of the planet, or the type of weather, or the type of creatures that are there. Those things changed. But all this other stuff changed too. You just don't really notice. It just looks like a deck of cards. So in the game, it looks like the same planet, even though all this stuff has changed. But that's not even specifically what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the number. So now that I have shuffled this deck of cards, and I've shuffled it up really, really well, and I've gotten it into an order that's in whatever that order is, if I were to stop shuffling, and okay, it is now in a specific order, which we can see again by just running it out. It's in an order. What is the likelihood that if I were to shuffle this again and again and again and again and again and again, what is the chance that after I finish shuffling the deck again, it'll be in this order ever again? What is the chance that if I reshuffle this, out of what number would be the likelihood that I would end up having it shuffled in the same order again? There's 52 cards, 1 in 52? No, of course not. But 1 in 1,000? 1 in 10,000? 1 in a million? The answer would probably surprise you heavily. Let's take, for instance, this number of 14 quadrillion. That's the number of planets there are, right? In this game. That's a ridiculously huge number. Would you believe that the chances that I have shuffled this in the same order would be 1 in 14 quadrillion? Maybe? Probably not. Nowhere near that much, right? Well, actually more. More than 14 quadrillion possible ways to order this deck. And the likelihood of me reshuffling this and having it end up in the same order is far greater than 14 quadrillion, actually. So you can actually take 14 quadrillion and you can double it. You can triple it. You can multiply it by 10. You can multiply it by 100. You can multiply it by 1,000. You can multiply 14 quadrillion by 14 quadrillion, and you still are not at this number. At the number of how many different ways this can be reordered. The number is so huge that never, ever, after I shuffled this, it is almost entirely implausible. The chances that this deck is the same as any other deck that has ever been shuffled in the world is unlikely. Almost every single time you shuffle a deck and finish, and you go, okay, this one is thoroughly shuffled after, 7 or 8 good riffle shuffles, the chances that that deck is now in the same order as any other deck in history of mankind is extremely unlikely. In fact, the number of different possibilities that this deck could have for an order is larger than the amount of atoms that exist on this planet. Atoms, the very basic building blocks that makes up us and everything around us and our entire planet, is less than the amount of different possibilities this deck has for its order. I know, that's crazy, right? But how is that possible? How could this possibly have that many different possible combinations of orders? Well, it's actually kind of simple, really, and I can break it down, somewhat here. I'm gonna use only a handful of cards to do this because it's gonna be difficult. So let's start with 2 cards. Okay, how many different possible orders could this be in? We have 1, 2. Okay, they're in this order. Then they're in this order. That's it. We only got 2. There's only 2 possible ways that these cards could be in any particular order, right? 2 cards, 2 possible ways. Let's add a 3rd card. Now they're in this order. So that's 1 order. Then we have 2nd order. Then we have 3rd order. Then we have 5th order. Then we have 6th order, somewhere in there. 6th order. I don't know. I got lost trying to do this in the camera, but there's 6 orders possible. So how does that work? So with 2 cards, we only had 2 possible orders. With 3, we have 6 possible orders. So with 2, we have exactly the same amount as there are cards. With 3, we have double the amount as there are cards. And I could tell you right now, without actually doing this, because I can't go through all these different orders in my head, it's not really going to work. If I add a 4th card, how many orders are there now? The answer is 24. Or no, 28. 28, I believe. Let me double check that real quick. No, it was 24. I was right. 24. There's 24 possible different orders. But why? Why is there 24 possible different orders? How come it's increasing so exponentially? In fact, if we went to a 5th card, and I added a 5th card, there are 120 different orders that I could put these cards in. It's jumping up at a huge rate. Why? Why is it doing that? So what this is called is a factorial. But let's go back to just 2 cards. 2 cards. So there's only 2 orders they can be in, right? That's easy enough for us to see. You got 1, 2. Great. However, if you add a 3rd card, you still only have 2 ways that these cards can be. But now you have this card here. So that's number 3. But then you also have to have, like, say, this card has to be the one here. So then you've got 1, 2, and 3. Well, okay, let me think about a better way to do that. So you've got these 2. You got 1 position, 2 position. You add a 3rd card, and now you still only have 2 ways that these 2 cards can be, but you've got a 3rd card you have to add on to the end. And you're going to have to do that 3 times, because each one is going to only have, so this one, you're going to have 2 positions that the cards after it can be in. This card, you're going to have 2 positions the card after it can be in. And then the last card, you're only going to have 2 positions the card after it can be in. So you've got 2, 2, and 2, that is 6. And that's how you get to that number, right? If you add a 4th, now you have 6 different ways that this can be in. But that first card is going to change 4 times, right? So the first time you're going to have a 2 of clubs, and then 6 ways that these cards can be arranged after it. Then the next time you're going to have the 7 of diamonds, and only 6 ways that these 3 cards can be arranged after it. And then next you're going to have the 4 of hearts, and only 3 ways that these can be arranged after it. And then last you're going to have the 6, with only 3 ways those cards can be arranged after it. Or 6 cards, 6 ways that they can be rearranged after it. So it's 6 times 4 gets you 24. And then when you add on again, you're going to have a 5th card. So now it's 5 times the previous value of 24, which is 120. If I add a sixth card, it's 6 times 120. And so on and so on and so on. That's how it continues to get larger and larger and larger. So every time we add one more card, we're just multiplying by yet another number of the previous product. So it scales up quickly. As you can see, the first number is 2, then it's 6, then it's 24, then it's 120. And let's go up one more and do a factorial of 6. It's 720. 6 times 120. Then you go up to a factorial of 7. You get 5,040. It scales up incredibly quickly. So, if we were to use playing cards to show 14 quadrillion possible ways that we could order these cards, what would we have to do? Well, this is the amount of cards that we would have left if we wanted to have a factorial of much closer to 14 quadrillion choices. In fact, we could take one away, and this is 18 cards. That leaves us with 6 point something quadrillion options for the order that these cards can be in. Just 18 cards. If we add the 19th, we now have 121.6 quadrillion options. Different ways that this can be ordered. It really is an incredibly difficult thing to wrap our minds around. Because remember, this gives us 121 quadrillion possible possibilities. Almost 10 times as much as No Man's Sky claims to give us. This is the amount of the deck that's left to add on to that. In fact, this isn't even adding it on. This is continuing to multiply even bigger and bigger numbers. We're at 19 already with 121.6 quadrillion options, and we're going to multiply that by 20. By 20! It's only going to get exponentially larger. And we still have the rest of the deck to go through. This number is so ridiculously huge, it's unbelievable. So when it comes to No Man's Sky, where they're saying, oh, it's 14 quadrillion planets, it's so crazy and so much, think about how many different things can be different on a planet. Think about how the terrain is different, how the color of the planet in general is. Think about whether it's grassy or filled with water or icy or hot or whatever else. Think about all those things. Think about how many different things could possibly be in the sky around it. Think of what kind of different animals and plant life it can have. Think about where these different bases could be, like alien little bases and stuff. Think about where all these different things could be on this planet. How many different possibilities there are for those. And think about how small the seed must be. Because to get 14 quadrillion, when you have that many possible different options, there must be some other way that they handle that on a smaller scale, right? Let me reword that. Let's say you have 20 different things on each planet that can be different from one another. We already know that there can't be 20 different seeds for those things. And the way you have to think about this is let's say one of the things that can change is what type of planet it is. Let's just go as basic as we can and think about what type of planet is this? Is this a lush foresty planet? Is this like a desert planet? Is this a watery planet? Is this a lava type planet, a really hot planet? Is this a gaseous planet? Is this an acidy type planet or whatever? However many different types of planets you can think of. That's going to be just one of your seeds. So let's say you have 5 different planet types or maybe 10 different planet types and you have one seed for those. So that one space in your algorithm can have 10 options in it. And then the next space maybe has 10 options. The next space maybe has 10 options. The next space maybe has 10 options. You have to think about, okay, in my example, 14 quadrillion different ways to order these things happens within 19 cards, in less than 19 cards. But each one of these options is unique in and of itself. If we were to say, okay, you're going to have a deck of 52 cards, but each card of those 52 is going to be randomly selected out of a different deck of cards. So you're going to have 52 decks of cards that you're taking one card out of each to make up another deck of 52 cards. So each card could potentially be represented in that new deck 52 times, or it could never be represented in that deck. How many different combinations are there then? That number is so astronomically small, it's unbelievable, because now you're talking about a factor of 52 times a factor of 52. It's astronomically, ridiculously huge to the point that I don't even think we could calculate that number. It's just ridiculous. So, no, the way the seeding has to work has to be a relatively small scale, because you have so many things that you want to put into that algorithm, but only so many options for each one. And yeah, it's not surprising to me that we see a fairly similar planets as we go, because there's no way they could possibly have them change very much and have 14 quadrillion of them. And just like a deck of cards, it's going to look pretty much like any other deck of cards you've ever seen, because we don't have the ability to keep track of 52 different possible things going on in this deck. So anyway, I just thought that was really interesting, that the number 14 quadrillion isn't anywhere near as big as we thought it was, and I hope you found it interesting as well. If you did, let me know. Appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you learned something interesting that you can share with your friends. So, thanks, guys. Take it easy.